No, skepticism is awesome.
There
It's
you
like
go.
it's a superpower. It's like you can see the Matrix code.
How many people here have seen a UFO? Cool. Was it somebody from Alpha Centauri? Was it an airplane? I used to live in Vegas, and me and my friends now and then would play what we called Area 51 Chicken. If anybody's been to Area 51, because you can go find at least the gate. If you've ever done it, you go to Mercury, where it is, and there's this one road. It's called Mercury Road, and it's like the kind of the road where you get to the sign, the amazing sign that says, warning, this is a government thing. So we all thought it was just cute to just drive as far in as we could before people stopped us to see what would happen. And there's no aliens at Area 51 now. It's kind of, you can go find what it is. I mean, it's EEG, which is like a power company doing a lot of experiments with magnets there. And then they also helped develop stealth technology for the stealth fighter, which then was used in the stealth bomber. But at the time, people know exactly what it was, so we would just cute things like keep driving past the point where they said you should stop now. And then we'd say whoever can keep going the longest wins. And actually, the not convincing part, the thing that made some of our other friends were just convinced that aliens are there, and was that one of the times one of our friends' cars that kept going got shot at a few times, probably by the government officials, probably not, probably the private company who was allowed to do it on the government land. But so that's why people still believe this crazy stuff. So that's why talks like this are kind of fun, because I lived in an area where this is either people were like, you guys are crazy, because I knew people who work, and I still do, that work at Area 51, and it's not technically a government installation because it's a private company who runs it, even though it's being leased. It's government land, but it's not like a real thing. So they have plausible deniability. But so I did a lot of stuff around all this craziness, and when you look through it as a skeptic, you're like, okay, nothing is here. So UFO stuff is fun. I think it's great. So the Billy Meier stuff is great. There's a few others, but this one's really fun. And you took a long time on this one, so I'll let you talk about it. Yeah. So I'll pass it to the man. Tell everybody a little bit about yourself, and then tell them about which aliens are going to probe their ass next.
There's no probing.
Oh.
There's no probing. We'll just get that out right now. No one has been or will be probed.
All right.
We're here for the probing.
Yeah. Well, so if you're here for probing, I'm sorry.
We were called to be probing.
That's the podcasters next door.
Now, what? I started that track.
Hello, thank you for coming. And again, no probing. Just want to make it very clear. I've been dealing with this case since 2003. I'll explain a little bit later on how I got started. Who here has ever heard of Billy Meier? All right, that's about 2/3. So, Billy Meier is this 70-plus-year-old, 1.5-armed Swiss farmer. And he claims to have been in contact with these extraterrestrials called the Plejaren. Formerly, they were known as the Pleiadians, since he was 5 years old when he started having telepathic contact with them. So he claims. And then there's some interesting things that are in Billy Meier's official biography and in official documentaries that were made about him, such as when he was 14 years old, he was arrested and convicted for assault and sent to youth prison, and then while there decided to send out a letter to all the heads of state. Why the heads of state around the world chose not to listen to a 14-year-old who was in prison? You know, it's one of the many questions about the case. Then when he was 16, he got arrested again and was convicted and sent to prison. This time he broke out and joined the French Foreign Legion, because that seemed like a good idea to do to a 16-year-old in Switzerland. And then he decided to leave the French Foreign Legion.
And he escaped. He did something quite unusual. He walked out.
Is that coming through? But I don't think the audio is.
I returned to Switzerland and I gave myself up to the authorities.
The audio plug is plugged in, and you had the test earlier. Huh. Oh, there we go. Back. All right. Let's start this over.
And he escaped. He did something quite unusual. He walked out across the desert, left the French Foreign Legion behind him.
That's why I returned to Switzerland, and I gave myself up to the authorities, who locked me up in an institution for more than 2 years.
Anstalt eingelocht für mehr als 2 Jahre.
And after he got out of his institution, which they've never been clear on if it was a criminal or psychological institution, he then sent another warning to the various governments around this time just to Europe. And again, people wonder why, if he did send these, there's actually no evidence that he did send these letters that he claims to have sent at the time he claims to have sent them. But it does seem odd to some of the believers why they wouldn't listen to someone who had been institutionalized, arrested, convicted twice, escaped, and deserted from the French Foreign Legion. In 1960, when he was 23 years old, he started to travel the Middle East as a day laborer. And in 1963, he claims to have been some sort of adventure superhero known as the Phantom. Also in 1963, he claims to have engaged in a little bit of grave robbing with this man named Issa Rashid. The grave that they claim to have busted into is from this guy named Emmanuel. You may otherwise know him as Jesus Christ. And then in 1964, while he was in India, he took his first UFO photos. And shortly thereafter, he was expelled from India on charges of vagrancy. And the following year, he was driving a bus, had his left arm hanging out the bus window. The bus crashed, and his left forearm was severed. Apparently, he never paid attention as the bus driver to this sign, "Keep your arms inside the vehicle at all times." In 1967, he met and married a woman by the name of Calliope, and in the late 60s and early 70s, they started to raise their family in Switzerland. In 1975, he created this organization called FIGU. I'm not going to even try to pronounce what it stands for in German, but it's basically this organization that is dedicated to the teachings of his alleged extraterrestrial contacts known as the Plejaren. And it was in the late 1970s and early 1980s that the photographs and the contacts of his started to be published. What made Meier interesting is that prior to him, most UFO photos were of rather nondescript blobs of light, whereas his showed a structured object, a structured craft. This one, the second one, became rather famous in the 1990s because it was the basis of the I Want to Believe poster that was shown in Fox Mulder's office in the X-Files. So you're tying it all together with the science fiction here at Dragon Con. Now, In addition to his photographs, he has various other forms of evidence that he has provided throughout the years, including metal samples, 8mm movies, audio recordings, and prophecies. But by the 1990s, he basically had stopped providing physical evidence and was concentrating just on the prophecies. In 1997, his wife, Calliope, divorced him and had this
A
to say.
person who knows Meier better than anyone else, his own ex-wife, Poppy Meier, also accuses him of being a blatant hoaxer. She points to his most recent UFO film as perhaps his most outrageous fake ever.
The truth is, my ex-husband is lying regarding the UFO affair. When I saw the UFO pictures that looked like a wedding cake, I asked myself, where did I see these lines before? This underpart. I realized it was a lid from a trash can. I compared the lid to the spaceship and identified these lines as being exactly what is on the lid.
Poppy Meier reveals that her ex-husband's skillful use of models and household implements is not only manipulative, but downright dangerous. She warns that he is using his faked UFO images to finance and promote a cult. Thousands of followers worldwide have flocked to Meier because they believe his message, namely, that the end of the world is coming, and that his films prove he is the one chosen by aliens to help mankind survive. Meier's critics say he has his cult completely under his control.
Billy Meier is like a god to them.
So, as was mentioned in that clip, that was from a show in the late 1990s, there's been people who have claimed that Figu is a cult. And there are certainly cultish aspects to the organization, such as having a charismatic leader. You know, there is a mandatory tithing for its membership, and there's the promise of these forbidden or secret knowledge, and claims that the leader has been reincarnated. In fact, Meier claims to be the 7th incarnation of the contact between Earth and the Pleiaren. 2 previous incarnations, of course, include Jesus Christ and Muhammad. But there's a couple of things that I personally don't believe that Figu makes it all the way to a full cult status. One of the things is that, as far as I've been able to determine, there is no separation from the families. So you don't get isolated the way that other cults do, and you have the ability to leave. They don't keep people there against their will, as far as I've been able to determine. But there are definitely some very weird aspects to the organization. Now, regarding the physical evidence that he's provided, the photographs are definitely the most popular, and his wedding cake UFO is one of the more famous or infamous, depending on who you talk to, of his UFOs. It was actually the last type of UFO that he took photos of, and his supporters claim that this is a large craft. They claim it is a large craft when it's 11 feet in diameter, which seems rather small to me for interstellar travel. But, you know, they claim it's large. However, there's a guy by the name of Phil Langdon in the UK who has done an amazing job and has figured out exactly how this model was made. And it does all start with the base of it, which is the lid of a 17.5-inch Harco Star container lid. And we know that Meier had access to these because they use these containers in their storage facility at Figu. You're also going to need some everyday household objects. One of the things that happens a lot is that a lot of the supporters of Meier say, well, how could a one-armed man do all of this? Well, it's kind of derogatory. They seem to be putting down his abilities, you know, when they keep referring to him as a simple one-armed Swiss farmer. Technically, though, he's 1.5 armed. He's missing only the forearm of his left arm. And Phil did an amazing thing. He knew that this was be an issue, so he videotaped himself through every step of the process, making the model with only 1.5 arms. I'll just jump through a few things here, and because he was very detailed in making sure that everyone would know exactly how he was doing this. And to prove that a one-armed man, or technically 1.5, could do all of this. You'll also need some biscuit tin lids, some wooden bowls with the lip removed, which will then get glued together. Use a little wire mesh and some washers for some detail, and spray paint it with chrome paint to make it nice and pretty. You're also going to be using some eyelets to make this design underneath it, and 45 30mm Christmas ornaments with the hanging caps removed. And it really is amazing on the work that Phil has done. And I love the fact that he has videotaped himself at every stage on how to make this using 1.5 arms. Because this is one of the things that goes on and on about the case from the supporters is, how could someone missing an arm do all this? And Phil shows exactly how you can do all of this with just one arm. The other thing that's really neat is when you have to get up to the second layer, this shows you, it's a rather complicated and really detailed sort of thing that he ended up having to figure out in order to, because it would definitely be easier if you had 2 arms to glue some of these things together. So what he figured out you use one Christmas ornament to glue to the model, and you use a second Christmas ornament to hold it in place. Until it dries. You're also going to need to cut the corners off of plastic take-home, lids, glue them to a couple more Christmas ornaments. You'll also need the 6-inch flower pot tray. Again, spray paint it all, make it nice and pretty. Use the shelf pins, because these are a nice added little detail. Gives it a little other type of color. You get a little brass work in there. You have a brass and silver sort of motif going. Get 8 more Christmas ornaments to put at the top. Need to cut the caps off of 100 copper pins, and put them, and then you glue them around the barrier. And again, he videotaped himself doing all of it with 1.5 arms. And once you do that, you get this, which looks something like this. Unfortunately, mine got a little crushed. Phil sent this to me last year. It got a little crushed in the flight here, and I didn't realize it until I just opened it up a moment ago.
Pull it apart.
I want to get a picture.
And it's pretty neat. Yeah, you have a trash can lid. You got you look underneath. That's where the eyelets are to make it look like in certain light. It looks like there are these glowing lights from underneath it. Lots of Christmas ornaments. There's your corners from the take-home plastic lids from your Chinese takeout. And again, you can do this. These are all found objects. There's nothing special that is required. And then Phil took thousands of photographs. And so here's Billy Meier's version, and here's Phil's recreation of that photo. Meier, Phil, Meier, and Phil. And he also reproduced Billy Meier's Type 1 UFO, his Type 2 UFO, and his Type 4 UFO. And on the Billy Meier UFO case website, you will find the instructions on how you can make these for yourself, along with all the photographs and all the videos that Phil has taken showing how he did this. One of the other famous photographs that Meier has released is this picture when the Plejaren took him back in time to the age of dinosaurs. And he saw this lovely image of this pteranodon, catching or dropping, prey or something like that. Unfortunately, it turns out to be from a illustration. Hold on, I just remembered something here. Hold on a second. So, you have this illustration, which he took a photograph of. His is obviously a little lower in quality. And it comes from this book, Life Before Man, which was published in 1972. The illustration is here on page 137. And it's an illustration by an artist named Zdeněk Burian, and it was published in Prague. And chances are Meier thought no one ever would realize this, that he could take this photo. The internet in history has been really bad for Meier because a lot of things get reprinted and come out later, and we can find out what it was that he was doing. And the thing with this book, originally it was just in Prague, but then the British publishing company of Thames and Hudson got the rights to it and published it around the world. Another one of his more famous photographs is of his extraterrestrial contact named Asket. This was published in a 1983 book, UFO Contact from the Pleiades, Volume 2. Originally, they were called Pleiadians, and then we found out that the Pleiades is not remotely possible to support life, and then they became the Plejaren of a parallel universe that's located near the Pleiades. So, in the 1991 German book, And Yet They Fly, this photo is reprinted, a little better quality, along with this photo, which they claim is Asket and another extraterrestrial contact named Nira. Here's the thing, though. Asket is actually the singer and dancer Michel Delafave, who was a longtime member of the Gold Diggers and the Dingaling Sisters, who appeared on the Dean Martin Variety Show from 1969 to 1973. And Nira is Susan Lund, who appeared on the show from 1968 to 1973. Michelle still performs today, and she's here, she's on the right, and Lindsay Bloom, another former gold digger, is on her left. And she found out that Billy Meier had used her photograph as his extraterrestrial contact in 2007, and this is what she had to say about it. I know that the picture of myself and Susie is from the Dean Martin Variety Show when the Gold Diggers were guests on the show. I think it was around 1971, and I did wear my hair with little curls at the side of my face. It amazes me that he chose that picture. I guess it was when they did the reruns in Europe. I do not want anyone thinking I am causing any problems. I am simply stating the truth involved with these pictures. I just know a picture of myself when I see one, as anyone else would. I know it is from a segment when the Gold Diggers would sit around Dean Martin and sing beautiful ballads called Welcome to My World. She also sent me this screen capture, which appears to be from the same episode as the photo that Meier had published. Now, a strange thing happened in 2001 with the English publication of And Yet They Fly. Now, these photographs had an entirely new explanation. And Billy now says, quote, unfortunately, during my conversation with Ptah, who's one of his extraterrestrial contacts, he revealed that the two women depicted in the photos are not Asket and Nira from the doll universe, but two American lookalikes. These photos are malicious hoaxes and were switched upon the order of, and in collaboration with, the Men in Black. So, why the change in 2001? In the 1990s, the Best of the Dean Martin variety show started to be released on home video. I asked Lee Elders, who was one of the original investigators and the writer and publisher of that first Contact from the Pleiades book, about did Meier ever say, obviously Meier had to review these photos in these books prior to their publication, and Lee said this: Billy supplied the material that was analyzed. I have letters from him stating that he was thrilled with the presentation. We gave him a couple hundred books at his request. I still have the letters saying he and the Pleiadians were happy the book had been done. In fact, the publication was mentioned in the original contact notes. So for 18 years, from 1983 to 2001, these photographs of Asket and Nira were promoted and published multiple times in multiple locations as being his extraterrestrial contacts. But then in 2001, the description for the photos changed, and the only thing that seems different is that the Dean Martin variety show was released on home video. One of the other things that Meier has presented as evidence of his extraterrestrial contact is metal samples which claim to show extraterrestrial composition and manufacturing. This is what it looks like. A little depressing, I know. You think, if you have these giant ships, maybe you could get a control panel or something, but no, they sent lumps. And in the book, in the 1991 version of And Yet They Fly, it was said that the analysis was done by a man by the name of Marcel Vogel using a scanning electron microscope. And here's what was said. The specimen had an enormous melange of almost all of the elements of the periodic table. Each pure element was bonded to each of the others, yet somehow retained its own identity. At 500 times magnification, the rare earth metal thulium was detected. At 1600 times, there are structures within structures, and at 2500 times, it is metal, but at the same time, it is crystal. There's a little bit of a problem. I mean, if you did have a piece of metal that contained every element in the periodic table, it would probably be very bad to come in contact with, if it was even possible for such a thing to exist. This is an image of a diatom, which is a type of phytoplankton at 5,000 times magnification. Using magnification far greater than what they claimed they used, it is still impossible to view the atomic structure of the object. You simply cannot magnify something down to see what it is made of. You need to use gas chromatography or mass spectrometry. Now, it is possible, there are variations of the scanning electron microscope that use energy dispersive spectrometry, but none of the information that I've been able to find published about the case says that they ever used this, that they only used a scanning electron microscope. Here's one thing to keep in mind. Marcel Vogel was not a metallurgist. He was a chemist. And it's kind of wrong for a chemist to do a metallurgical analysis. That's just not what they're trained in. It turns out, however, that an actual metallurgist did examine it.
Next, Stevens takes the metal fragments to be examined under the electronic spectrometer to determine their components.
Area in the sample.
Preliminary examination of the metal has been done in Switzerland.
And we've got these little marker bars here that we can line up on each peak as they come up. This one indicates we have silver there. Over here, let's see. We've got some copper, small amount of copper. That looks like about all that's in here at the moment.
The big band here is silver, though.
The big one is silver.
Yeah, it contained nothing more than silver and copper. And that's what the metallurgist found. It was only after that disappointing result that the material was sent to Vogel. Vogel, it should be noted, it was also a pro-UFO believer and a firm believer in crystal therapy and pyramids and other sorts of things along that line. Also, his tests were never, the metal was never sent to anyone else for replication other than that initial one, which they didn't like the findings of. For many years, Meier stated that the metal samples provided to him by his ET contacts had been lost or stolen. However, in 2004, his publicist, yes, Billy Meier has a publicist, named Michael Horn, publicly stated that Meier actually did have some of this metal and that he would try to get Meier to release some of it for testing by the Independent Investigations Group and the James Randi Educational Foundation. Yeah, we're still waiting. Meier also in the late 70s, early 80s made a series of 8mm and Super 8mm films. But there's a problem with them in that they were never transferred to video correctly. The most basic thing that you do is you connect a video camera to a projector and do it that way. But you really want to take it to a professional lab. It's a process known as telecine. But the Meier films were not even done in this most basic way. What they did was, it was a Japanese television company came to Meier's house. This is not Meier's house, by the way. It's just a representation. And Meier projected the films onto a movie screen in his house. Again, not actually Meier's house. And the Japanese television crew videotaped the projections. This is not the Japanese television crew. Because the Japanese crew was videotaping a projection of the films are never in focus. Also, the camera operator did his own movements on it, so you don't actually know what the movements in the original films were. The only way to do this is to get these things to be transferred properly. I have offered to pay for high-definition film transfers of these. But for some reason, Meier and his supporters have been unable or unwilling to allow the material to be released for transfer. And the thing is, it doesn't have to come to me. I know the lab to send it to. I work professionally in Hollywood in post-production. I know where the stuff needs to go for a proper transfer. And his own agents can take this stuff to this lab. I will just pay the lab to have it done properly. Now, there's a couple things that they have claimed about the films, even though they are of not good quality to make a determination. And one is this partial eclipse, where it appears as though the object, the UFO, must be a large thing going behind a hill. Here's what that film looks like. And here's what it looks like blown up 400%. The thing is, the image quality is so poor, you can't tell if the UFO is in front of the hill or if it is behind the hill. And the only way that we would ever be able to know is if these things ever get transferred properly. Because especially if we do a high-definition film scan, we'll be able to tell if one object is in front of the other. But right now we have something dark intersecting on a two-dimensional plane with something else that is dark. Another one of the films that they talk about a lot is this thing called The Jump, where the film, where the UFO appears to be in two places at the same time on a single frame of video. So look up there at the top, and now, bam, it's down at the bottom. So here's the thing. This is going to get a little technical, and again, this is what I do for a living professionally, is working in post-production. So film is recorded at 24 frames a second. standard definition video is recorded at 30 frames a second, and there are 2 fields for every video frame. In order to keep the same running time, 6 frames of film have to be added to every second of videotape. So you're basically taking 4 frames of film and making them become 5 frames of video. And you do this by repeating frames of film on the various video fields. So you will have times where you have a single frame of video contain 2 frames of film. So here's this frame, and you have both video fields there. Now here's just field 1. Surprise! Now you only have the UFO in one location. And here's field 2. And surprise, you only have the UFO in another location. This is exactly what you expect to see when you transfer film to video. And it's just a coincidence that this interlaced double image happens when the object changes location, which was most likely done by turning the camera off, repositioning it, and turning the camera back on. And you know, all these videos are up on the website as well, and you'll see how really mind-numbingly bad some of them are. But in case you don't want to go to the website, here's one of the most mind-numbingly bad ones. And Phil has not only reproduced the photographs, he's reproduced the movies as well. This is one of the most famous of the Meier films because it shows the UFO circling around this tree in front of a farmhouse. Imagine this.
I'm dizzy, Captain. Stop. Is he related to Ed Wood?
No. Ed Wood is far more accomplished. Now, the other thing that's interesting about this tree is that at this, people know where this, found this farmhouse, and they ask the owners, where the tree is, there's no tree there. And the owner's like, we never had a tree there. And so here's Phil's recreation. Or again, it shows the object hovering around and circling around this tree. Now, it's just forced perspective. The tree is 2 feet tall. The tree is only 2 feet tall. And you can actually create some really interesting moves where and Phil was able to make it go in different directions rather quickly. This is another one of Meier's more famous ones where you get to look up at the UFO. Now this camera move here, this is one of the things I was talking about where this camera move was created by the Japanese television company. The actual projection is static. But look at that. Isn't that amazing? And Meier, looking up at his contacts and motioning for them to come and say hi. See? Wave. They're all friendly. So Phil did this. Oh, surprise, surprise. Yeah. But I love what Phil does coming up here. He took what Meier did and made it a little more. Meier motioned to his UFO, but his UFO didn't come follow him. But Langdon's UFO acts on command. It will come towards him and it will stop. One of the other things that's related to these films is that in 1980, he apparently had they're called beam ships. That's what he calls the UFOs, and he recorded what was claimed to be the sound of these ships. And this is it. This goes on for 48 very, very long minutes. I will not do that to you. And but it is an interesting sound. You know, kind of seems a bit like a 1950s, you know, Forbidden Planet sort of thing. It is actually a pretty neat and interesting sound. So, in the published analysis of this, they said that this sound was recorded on audio cassette tape, and that's important to keep in mind. And that they performed tests in the audible range, which they mistakenly say is 20 hertz to 2000 hertz, and found 24 characteristic frequencies within the audible range and 8 outside of it. If they only performed tests in the audible range, how did they find 8 inaudible frequencies? But here's something to keep in mind. The actual range of human hearing is 15 hertz to 20,000 hertz if you don't have any sort of biological problem where you've listened to rock and roll music too loud. A modern cassette deck that you would have as part of a stereo system can only record frequencies from 25 hertz to 19,000 hertz. A modern portable cassette deck, and yes, I understand that seems weird to talk about a modern portable cassette deck, can only record 100 hertz to 8,000 hertz. And a cassette deck from around the time that Meier recorded his could only record up to 5,000 hertz. So there's no way that any form of audio cassette recorder can record sounds outside of the range of human hearing. But let's say that Meier had a magical audio recorder. What about the cassette tape itself? Maxell's professional range of audio cassette tape can only record frequencies from 315 hertz to 16,000 hertz. So there's no way that they ever could have recorded anything in the inaudible frequencies. And it's really kind of annoying that they keep saying that they did. After I had demonstrated this in 2008, that there was no way that this could be done, Michael Horn, Billy Meier's publicist, said this, that the 8 inaudible sounds were just a calculation based on the existing sounds. That's not what they said originally. They said that they found inaudible frequencies. But what is it? It's something that's been wondering for 30 plus years exactly what this is, and there's been several theories. Is it just a sound effects, record? Is it an oscillator or a synthesizer? Is it feedback played through a tape delay? Again, thanks to Phil Langdon, we know exactly what this is. When one day Phil was setting up his Type 1 UFO model to take some photographs of, and it's basically a long horizontal fishing line, and then the model sets in the middle of it. As he was setting it up, a strange but familiar sound began to emanate from it. Just so you know, I wanted to keep that going as that click went in, so you didn't know that this is added later. So what's happening is a process known as acoustic resonance. And this is what stringed instruments use. You vibrate a string, the vibrations transfer into the hollow body, and it produces tones. And Phil, I'll let him describe this for himself.
Okay. I think that's audible on the camera, on the microphone. What you're listening to is the supposed sounds of the beam ships, but in fact, it's the fishing line itself, and it's because it's held under high tension between the two trees which are there. The straggly one, that one there, and this one here. Simply because it's a lot easier to tie onto a tree that doesn't have branches everywhere and leaves all over the place. It's a lot easier than the other types of trees like this one, this one, this one. I've tied onto that before, but it's tricky. So it's easy with the scarce looking trees. Anyway, the sound from the beam chips it comes from the same principle as a guitar string. You know, if this is fishing line under tension and it's stopped at this point where the model is, this point here, I've got a standing wave on the fishing line between the model and the tree, and that is going to vibrate in the wind. That's all it is. It vibrates in the wind and it makes that sound, and that's it.
One of the last things that Meier deals with now, because for whatever reason he doesn't produce physical evidence any longer. He talks about prophecies. He is in these translated discussions with his extraterrestrial contacts in these things called the contact notes. And in one of these, of course, like lots of prophecies, it talks about World War III. And that World War III will happen when the heads of state of four heads of state die within 7 days of each other. Augusto Pinochet, Saparmurat Niyazov, Gerald Ford, and Saddam Hussein all died in December of 2006. Now, only Niyazov was an actual head of state at the time. The other three were formers, but let's just give them a benefit of doubt and say, okay, heads of state, whether they're in office or not. Saddam Hussein died on December 29th. Ford died on December 26th. Niyazov died on the 21st. As you may notice, that's more than 7 days. What they claim is that the clock recalculates. One person dies, you count down 7 days. Person dies within those 7 days, the clock resets, you count down 7 days. Person dies within those 7 days, clock resets, you count down another 7 days, and so on. So, in order for this to work, Pinochet has to die within one of these 7 days, even giving them that leeway. He died over here. So, no matter how you look at it, there's no way that this prophecy came true. But, again, once I did that, once I had shown this in 2008, that there's no way that this could have happened, a member of FIGU actually contacted the FIGU headquarters and asked if Meier ever said that this prophecy had come true. And they said no. And then this person contacted Michael Horn, Billy Meier's publicist, and asked him, why did you say this? I am not an employee of Meier or FIGU, nor a member of a mind control cult. I am free to publish my opinions whether they agree with Meier's or not. This is Meier's publicist. Keep that in mind. This is the guy who makes his living promoting Billy Meier. But in 2006, Michael Horn really, really wanted this to be coming true. Another one of his prophecies, a little tail into this, the World War III was supposed to happen within 2 years of these people dying. That those deaths happened in December of 2006. We should have had war by 2008. It hasn't happened. I don't know if anyone's noticed. Another one of the prophecies regards, and this is one that they put out as the best case example, about an accident at a nuclear power station near Lyon. Now notice it doesn't actually give that much detail. It's rather vague. It doesn't say that there will be and what day it will happen on, just that there might be at some time. But in 2005, Michael Horn said that this exact prophecy came true on August 12th, 2003. That date is important. So when people talk about nuclear accidents, they tend to think of 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl, now we have Fukushima to add. Basically they think of this. It's scary. In 2003, it was the worst heat wave in recorded history in August in Europe. 50,000 people died in Europe, and 15,000 people alone died in France due to heat exposure. 75% of France's electrical power comes from nuclear power plants, and they're located along various rivers. And the Bouguer power station is located along the Rhone River near Lyon. Now, they take the river water to help cool the reactor and then put it back out, and it never comes into contact with any radiation. It's just for the cooling process. And according to French environmental regulations, that water that's released back into the river cannot be warmer than 24 degrees centigrade because it could harm, the plant and animal life in the river. Well, during this time, they had requested 6 reactors had requested to release the water 1 degree warmer than normal, and that was in France on August 13th. Due to time differential, on August 12th, 2003, the day that Horn says that this came true, CNN had an article about the Bouguer power station near Lyon. The thing is that they had actually already requested and were granted an exemption. So while they tried to make it seem that this was going to happen, all that actually happened was that the water released into the river went from this to this. It was never a shutdown of the plant. There was never any talk of it shutting down. And if it had been shut down, many, many more people would have died. Again, in 2008, after I had shown how this couldn't have happened, Horn then said, "Oh, I'm sorry, it wasn't the 2003 incident that was the subject of the prophecy. It was an incident in 2001. If you have multiple things that can be said to be the result of the same prophecy, the prophecy has some problems." But the thing is, what happened in 2001 cannot be described as an accident either. In 1996, there are 5 power stations, 5 reactors at the Bouguer station. And you'll notice in this photo, there's only 4. That's because in 1996, the order to decommission Reactor 1 was announced. And in 2001, that scheduled decommissioning of the reactor began. That's it. Is it a hoax? It gets a little tricky using the word hoax, and it sometimes is used wrong. The reason I'm involved in this case is because a part-time employee at the Center for Inquiry in Los Angeles met with Michael Horn and said it was, quote, an easily reproducible hoax, end quote, and then proceeded to do absolutely nothing to replicate any of the evidence. Technically, only the perpetrator of a hoax can say that something was a hoax, like Ray Santilli did regarding the alien autopsy footage from the 1990s. Meier has never said that he has hoaxed anything. All I can do, and other researchers who have looked into this case can do, is promote the hoax hypothesis, if you will, and show how all of his material can be demonstrated through non-extraterrestrial means. But what if it's real? What if Meier really is in contact with these Pleiaren? I don't think anyone really would want to follow their spiritual teachings. Keep in mind, they're saying that these beings have vastly superior intellects and technology, have been in contact with humans for millennia, and done nothing. Imagine if you were the captain of some really rich yacht, full of food and medicine, and you're on your way to pick up your billionaire passenger. And you pass by an island and you see that there's dozens of shipwreck survivors fighting each other over the last coconut and starting to burn down the last tree for warmth. Would you provide help to those people, or would you just go, "Hi, nice to see you, I'm going to go this way"? The Pleiaren that Billy Meier claims to be in touch with have only ever said hi and moved along their way. Now, I don't want anyone to say, "Hey, what about the Prime Directive?" Captain Kirk violated that every week, and we loved him for it. And Starfleet never took his job away. I would much rather follow the humanistic spiritual teachings of Star Trek than the selfish and morally reprehensible spiritual teachings of Billy Meier's Pleiaren, even if the Pleiaren turned out to be real. Thank you. And we've got a few minutes if anyone has any questions. And again, if you go to this website, you'll find hundreds of videos and thousands of photos on how all this was put together.
Derek?
Yes?
Is this working? Okay. Derek, you're wrong. There will be probing.
Yes.
What is he actually getting out of this? I mean, is he getting a lot of money?
Yes, the way that tithing works, you have to provide 7% of your income. Oh, I'm sorry. The question was, what is he getting out of this? Is he making money? Yes. He sells these products, he sells these books, he sells these videos. You have to, even if you're not a full member of FIGU, you have to provide the equivalent of like 10% of 1 month's salary every year, plus travel to Switzerland and work on the farm for 3 days, or spend $12,000 to compensate for it. I mean, it gets expensive, and that's just for the non-official members. Once you become an official member, you have much higher fees and so on that you have to do. At times, I have described it as Scientology without the celebrities.
Waving at the rich people and sailing on your way, or waving at the poor people and sailing on your way, that's what the rich people do. Either that or they just ignore them and continue to sail on their way.
Yes, and they are still morally reprehensible.
Yes, they are.
Yes?
How big is his following?
It's uncertain. It's definitely in the hundreds, possibly in the low thousands. It's popular. It has a very avid fan base, but how large it is, no one's entirely sure. He doesn't release those records for obvious reasons. In fact, when you decide to become an official member, it specifically states you will not have any voting rights or rights to view any of the material.
Has his people or him had any contact with any other UFO proponents or anything? Or are they kind of their own independent?
Billy Meier is an interesting case. I kind of view him as the gateway drug to ufology. You will run into him when you're first starting out learning about the UFOs, because he's been very prolific. And some people will look at it and go, that's really crap, and move along. And then there's some going, I've never seen something so amazing, and then they're down the rabbit hole. Within the UFO community, they don't like Meier. They think he is nuts. And because Meier says he is the only person to have ever had any contact with any extraterrestrials. And for people who claim to have had contact with extraterrestrials, they don't like that. And it's so, and even Michael Horn, the way that he tends to get involved in debates is that he will say something, he'll issue a challenge online, and then when people ignore him, he then claims that they agree with him and they have that he has won the challenge that he made up. Michael Horn also has fabricated many misstatements over the years. There's an entire section on the website of things that he has attributed to people, and they've gone, what? And there's been some interesting actions over the years with him really pissing off a lot of people in the UFO community. Because the UFO community does not think that Meier is legit. Think about that for a moment. The UFO community does not think Meier is legitimate. Anything else? thank you for coming.